Hi everyone, good evening from Sri Lanka. Good morning to everyone who is joining us all over, and to our friends in India. Good evening to you as well. Good afternoon to wherever you are, wherever you are joining us from. I understand that we have a fantastic audience joining from India, from Sri Lanka, and then we have an audience joining us from Europe and several other countries as well. A warm welcome to all of you to a fantastic webinar. We've got some great insights coming up today with some fantastic panelists. Infopercept Consulting, one of the renowned cybersecurity service providers of the nation, warmly welcomes you to this webinar to spread awareness about the Generation Z technology and the pitfalls surrounding its operation. The webinar is titled Deception, the proactive layer of defense in depth, referring to the prominence of cybersecurity. And according to recent statistics, you have seen it, we have heard it, and it's all over the world, that cybercrime has increased by a massive 600% since the onset of the pandemic. And the cost of cybercrime damages has increased colossally over the past couple of years. Now, today we have this imminent set of panelists joining us, as we're going to have a fantastic panel discussion followed by a Q&A session to take you through more insights as to what can we do to overcome situation and throw more light into today's discussion that we have for today. Joining me, let me take a moment to introduce you to our fantastic set of panelists. We have the co-founder and CEO at Deceptive Bytes, Gartner co-vendor and expert in security operations and threat intelligence, Mr. Sagi Lamay. We're also joined by the technical director and founder of Breachsense Josh, who is the founder of Breachsense, which gives security teams visibility into their clients, employees, and third-party suppliers' breach data. We're happy to have with us Mr. Josh Amishav. And then we have the security solution architect, AWS. Ravindra is a security solution architect at AWS, and he works with customers across segments to help strengthen security posture of their workloads deployed on AWS. We have Mr. Ravindra Bhatt joining us for this section. And we're also joined by the CEO and co-founder, the dynamic person behind this entire event, joining us from Infopercept, cybersecurity leadership and strategy with over 2 decades of experience and has worked for clients globally. He's currently focusing on building Invetsys platform, leveraging lots of open source cybersecurity innovation. Happy to have Mr. Jaydeep Ruparelia joining us on today's discussion. Good evening, gentlemen. I'm Sharam Maskrini is joining you as your moderator from Sri Lanka. Thrilled to be on an international platform with some exciting stuff that we're going to have for the next 1 hour and 30 minutes. And we'll be having a Q&A session towards the end of today's session. Let's move on to the first area or segment, which I'd like to call it. And I would like to start with Mr. Sagi. I understand, sir, that you have a presentation, but take me through it. Deceptive Bytes is doing pioneering work in prevention by deception security. How does malware operate as a part of the current threat landscape, and how do you work on solving this? Sagi, Mr. Sagi, I think you're mute.
Sorry.
Brilliant.
So, thank you, Sharon, for the introduction. Hi, guys. Great to be here today. So I'm Sagi. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Deceptive Bytes. So we are Deceptive Bytes. We have an active endpoint cyber defense that prevents cyber attacks by using deception technology. Our mission is to close the gap and stop unknown and sophisticated cyber attacks that are able to evade existing security tools by using a very lightweight, easy to deploy and manage solution, which eventually will save time, money, and resources to organizations. Next. So in a bank, robbers will check its security before actually robbing it. An advanced bank will give the robbers the indicators that it has many security measures, such as cameras, motion detectors, guards, etc., and some obstacles like different floor plan, fake safe, etc. Those indicators will deter the robbers in the first place or prevent their success if they do get in. And eventually, if you think about it, malware behave exactly like bank robbers. Next. So malware is very clever and evasive. Before it actually starts to attack, it checks the environment it's running in, and it uses various ways to evade being detected and analysis by security systems and researchers. For example, a research shows that more than 98% of malware today is using at least one sandbox evasion technique, which means that every time it sees a sandbox environment, it tries to evade it in one way or another, while an additional research shows that every single attack malware is using at least 10 or more different evasion techniques. So we take advantage of it, and our deception technology uses the same defenses and techniques malware is using, but we do it against it. Basically, we are shaping the attacker's decision-making and beating the bad guys in their own game, and we have two main ways to do that. So the first one is our preemptive defense, which we make malware believe it's in an unattractive or dangerous environment to attack. And by doing so, we are reducing its motivation to attack and the chances of infection. So for example, we make malware believe it's running in a sandbox environment or a virtual machine, or there are many security tools that install on the endpoint. And basically in that phase, we'll stop more than 90% of malware. Usually it will be in less than a second or two from the moment they started to operate. It means from the moment they started to try and understand the environment they're running in. But you probably ask, what about the additional 10%? So if they don't care about the environment that we created or decide to attack anyway without checking it, we also have a proactive defense, which continue with our deception capabilities in a proactive and dynamic way, and basically changing the outcome of the attack. So for example, if a ransomware starts encrypting files, we'll give it the indicators that it was managed to encrypt them, and basically we do that in order to make it stop by itself its malicious activity very, very fast. So if we look at the process of an endpoint attack, our solution operates through the entire stages from scanning the endpoint at the beginning to the actual attack, which means that we increase our ability to stop the attack at any stage. So since the solution looks at how the attacker operates, his tools and techniques, but also how malware behaves and eventually how it protects itself, which is quite the same for different types of attacks. That's why the solution is effective against a variety of threats, including evasive malware, APTs and zero-days attacks, malicious links and documents. We are totally agnostic to that as well. Ransomware as mentioned, and also crypto miners, which eventually use the same evasion techniques to evade being detected. So our advantages is that we can prevent unknown and sophisticated threats with very high prevention and detection rate, and we do that in real time. It means during the attack itself, during execution. Since we don't scan anything, the solution is very lightweight and consumes little to no resources. I will get to some numbers in a minute. And since we don't use signatures, we don't need constant updates, and it can work in a standalone, disconnected, and VDI environments. And also, in comparison to different ways to protect endpoints, for us, we only need to know one evasion techniques to be able to potentially stop millions of future threats. Of course, we do that with low to no existing false positive. And in addition, we developed the solution in user mode, meaning that it's more stable than solutions that operate in the kernel mode. This is the user interface on the endpoint. Of course, it shows detected malware and blocked program by IT. As mentioned, it's extremely lightweight. It consumes less than 0.01% CPU, less than 20 megabytes of memory, and less than 1.5 megabytes of disk space, which means that it quickly deployed in less than 30 seconds and then it operates immediately. You don't even need to boot the endpoints. Since we don't use signatures, and eventually the evasion techniques that we implemented don't come often like signatures, the update is done every 3 to 6 months. And of course, what's also important to say is that we coexist with other security tools as we automatically detect and whitelist them during the installation. So up until now, we've discussed about our deception engine, which is the main engine of the solution, but also we have other engines as well. For example, application control that you can whitelist or blacklist applications, a behavioral engine that's meant to protect legitimate applications being used for malicious attempts, threat intelligence engine, and anti-malware and network, which is controlling Windows Defender and Windows Firewall that is already built in the operating system. Basically, we are utilizing the existing AV that already comes with the operating system and provide organizations the ability to utilize it without installing additional security layer and without paying additional costs. And also, we have a new engine, which is device control, that you can manage connected devices. Of course, everything is managed through our management console. Next, which is also easily deployed in just a few minutes. Then you can use it to deploy the agents through the server. Of course, you can use it in a few ways. You can use it on-premise, through the cloud, or even in a hybrid way. It's really up to you to decide. And also multi-tenancy capability. It has, of course, many capabilities, but it integrates to other systems like your SIEM, log, threat intelligence services, your sandbox environments, Active Directory, and as mentioned, Windows Defender and Windows Firewall. So to summarize, we help organizations protect against unknown and sophisticated threats and prevent damage to their data and assets while reducing reputational risk and operational burden. We have CISOs and IT managers by automating response to detected malware. This helps them reduce alert figures and handling of false positives. And we have the C-level increase efficiency to all employees' endpoints and protect them when working remotely. And as a result, we can help them reduce overall operational burden. Thank you very much. Hope you will enjoy the rest of the webinar.
Thank you, Mr. Sagi, for taking us through that presentation and also taking us through the importance of deception solution, bringing us how we can beat up the bad guys when it comes to an area of this. We're going to move on to the next question, and this question is to Mr. Josh. Breachsense, it's a very important and interesting space of giving security teams visibility into their clients' breach data. When Breachsense comes into picture, the damage for clients is being done, and what do you suggest companies should do in order to avoid and react on this?
So I think you really need to look at probably the top 3 initial attack vectors that are often used in hacks, such as ransomware. And you'll often find it comes down to stolen passwords, unpatched machines, right, and phishing attacks. And if you look at the latter 2, like unpatched machines, you really need a good asset inventory to know where your machines are, because obviously you can't patch what you don't know about. And for phishing, there's a lot of talk about phishing awareness training. Personally, I'm of the school of thought is you'll have to assume that people are going to make mistakes. And therefore, while phishing awareness training is going to be helpful, having technical controls in place that prevent users from making bad decisions is ultimately going to very often be more beneficial for the organization. But if you look at the first issue, the password reuse, that's very interesting, at least from my standpoint, because it's one of those things where if you've got valid user credentials, you can bypass any firewall, any web application, a WAF, or IDS system that's in place. So essentially, you need to ensure that you've got visibility into your users, your employees, and your software suppliers leak data, especially credentials, to make sure that that can't be used to get in. Now, we often recommend using 2FA, which will, even if your credentials are compromised, two-factor authentication can help prevent your account from being compromised in something like an attack takeover, account takeover attack. But even then, there are many instances, like in the recent EA attack, where the threat actors bypassed the 2FA requirement by using social engineering to be able to still gain access to administrative accounts, and ended up getting internal access to EA. So one of the things that's really important for companies to do, though, is to have visibility not only to their users' data, right? Because if you take one of the things that was in the news recently, I think yesterday, was Swiss Post, which is a large, they do a lot of airport-related services, including refueling, and they got hit with ransomware and ended up having a lot of flights canceled as a result. And there's been a large focus on attacking infrastructure such as fuel lines recently, and it reminds me a lot of the Colonial attack that happened last year, I think in May, right, in the United States, where it shut down gas in a lot of the eastern part of the US, and that happened actually due to password reuse. And in that case, there was an intern that reused the same password within the Colonial VPN as within a third-party website, and that site got breached. Attackers then used those credentials in a credential stuffing attack to gain access to the VPN, ended up gaining internal access, uploaded the ransomware, and shut down gas. Forced Colonial to shut down the gas pipeline. So the point is that companies need to have visibility not only to their users and to their employees, but also to their software suppliers' breach data. Because what happens very often is you may have the best protection, you may have perhaps you don't have any 0 days, and you don't have any phishing. None of your users will click on any links, but some of your software suppliers may get hit with ransomware or an attack, and they have your data. And when your software supplier when their data gets leaked, it's essentially your data. So without having visibility into that, it's very difficult to mitigate risk associated with your data getting out there, not only credentials, but also internal company documents, and just a lot of very sensitive PII. So that's kind of where Breachsense comes into play, that we help companies gain visibility into the users, employees, and their third-party suppliers' breach data in order to help them mitigate risk associated with not only account takeover attacks, but any ransomware or any other attacks where their data is being leaked.
Thank you very much, Josh. It's interesting to see how much changes have taken place over the years, because once upon a time, people were not too concerned about data too much. But now things have evolved so much that different organizations are very much keen on looking at the positive side of it, of taking care of data and breaching that trust as well. So thank you, Josh, for covering us that area. I'm going to move on now to a question to Mr. Ravindra Ved. Companies' security in their AWS environment is challenged. Do you think deception can help them in addressing this challenge as well?
Right. The security is job zero at AWS, and as a part of shared responsibility model for security in the cloud, especially, we put a lot of focus on getting the baseline security controls in place, putting the guardrails. But we can't keep one door closed and keep another door, or rather not look at the other part of the door, and that is the area which is constantly evolving threat landscape. And these threat landscapes are non-discriminatory, right? I mean, no one would say that I would use the most cool or the complex way to compromise the system. They will say, okay, I will take an opportunity to compromise anything, and I will find the weakest link to do that. And as we heard during the conversations, leak passwords, reuse credentials, these are the weakest links at times, right? And what happened here is that's where the deception techniques, they provide these necessary defense mechanisms to understand what techniques adversaries are using and trying to access the resources, right? So these sensors, they provide us inputs to further strengthen the guardrails to enrich the domain of domain set, which basically helps you in enriching the data sets for indicator of compromise. And these techniques eventually helps us understand what are the different attack vectors and look at the vulnerabilities and proactively fix them.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Wed. In addition to that, I think, is there anything else that you want to cover up, or should we take on when we have the Q&A session? Yeah, I think we can do that. We are moving on now to another important area, and this is where we have the keynote, which will be covered by the founder himself. The more complex digital landscape has become, it is easier, as we can see, adversaries to enter, and they're always successful to deceive either technology or people or processes or all of them. Can cybersecurity be as proactive as adversaries? And can it also be benefited from deception across digital landscape? My question is to Mr. Jaydeep.
Thanks, Sharon, for throwing the question to me. Thanks to Sagi, Josh, and Ravindra for sharing their insights as well. So on behalf of Infopercept, I thank all the panelists as well as people who have joined all over the world. Thank you, and let's see how we can help each other. For me, I'm going to cover the entire landscape where we can spread certain deception so that we can proper detect certain advanced attacks. So that's the overall presentation that I'm going to bring in. So normally what we see for a CISO, which is a Chief Information Security Officer, the challenge for him is the business definitely needs the digital transformation. And for bringing in the digital transformation, the landscape is becoming larger, the landscape is becoming complex, all in terms of they would have their own set of on-premises data centers where they would be running their own applications, databases, network systems. When it is manufacturing companies and the energy sector companies and other sectors which are prominently using the OT, IoT environments, the banking where the ATMs, the POS machines being used, and for all the digital transformation, people have to adopt cloud. So different clouds are being adopted, a lot of integration of the different mobile apps in the overall business. And when it comes to the landscape, like you are tightly integrated with the ecosystem, which is your partners, suppliers, manufacturers. Then again, the extension is also with the social media as well as the endpoint. So in all sense, this is the actual challenge which the world is facing. And when it comes to an organization, CISO has a real challenge to have the right prevention detection all across this landscape. So that's actually becoming very difficult. So when we look at the CISO and he has all the different technologies being already implemented, all in terms of they have their antivirus, their web application firewall, firewalls, content filters, different access controls, the intrusion prevention systems. There are systems like the patch management, encryption, biometrics. The major challenge with all these security solutions in the ecosystem is all this are in itself an application. So definitely it gives you the required prevention and detection, but since they are an application, they also are quite dependent on various signatures, various behaviors, and the way the attackers are always able to do their own new techniques. There are two things when attackers are executing an attack. One is the technique part of it and the tactic. So tactic is what has always been constant, where the objective of an attacker is always constant. But then probably with all the expertise this adversaries build, they are always able to build new techniques. And with new techniques, the CISO, when it comes to CISO and they are asked, normally we always ask this question, whether with all these technologies, do you feel, are you secured? And then probably with most of the CISOs across the globe, what we have seen is they're not very confident, because the challenges, they all understand that there could be a gap in terms of the solution not working, configuration is not done in the way it should be done, the best practices that needs to be adopted, the architecting, the design, the integration. So a lot of factors that coming. So that's the actual challenge the CISO has. And when we implement deception, where we are able to spread deception all across the landscape, and probably when we have a different kind of attacks simulated on those environment where we have deception spread it, we are able to detect certain very, very advanced and sophisticated attacks also. The reason behind it is the deception is more of a strategy. If we place it well with the right strategy, and if we have the right placement in terms of the different fake environments that can be created, like fake application, the fake host, fake files, the fake breadcrumbs, the username and passwords that can be spreaded, and the kind of fake identities that can be deployed also, then probably it definitely strengthens the defense. And even if any of the technology is bypassed, there is still a chance that we can lure the attacker to any of these fake services, and this can be spreaded all across the landscape. And post those detections, you can definitely have a lot of responses written, so that you are able to proactively prevent the advanced attacks where the attackers are trying to penetrate. So it definitely strengthens the defense. With the deception in place, when the attacker is trying to enter the environment, there are a lot of ways where there will be an early warning that will come to you. This particular solution requires very minimal intervention, meaning there is very less chance, I would say almost a zero chance, that you'll have the false negatives and the false positives, because this is the only technology in the entire security solutions ecosystem which is not to touch by the user as well as the attacker. Normally, most of the technologies that are deployed in a security landscape is the technologies which will be touched by the user as well as the attacker. And then probably it becomes the responsibility of an organization by the way of behavior, by the way of different rules, and the kind of analytics that they need to look at to see whether that is a false positive or false negative. Here, definitely once the decoys are being touched by the attacker, it's always an high alert for an organization, and definitely you need to act upon. And with this, this also strengthens your personalized threat intelligence, in the sense like a lot of organizations we see across the globe, which has so much of feeds coming in of different threat intel, but probably this is all that is happening, all in terms of the techniques and IOCs that are built, which are very, I would say, much meant for the organizations worldwide, but they're not meant only for you. While once having the deception in place, you are able to build those personalized threat intelligence, the kind of techniques the attackers are trying, and the kind of IOCs being used will be built for your organization. And most important is any technology which we try to bring in, the security technologies that we try to implement in an organization, you definitely require to make some changes. It requires some design changes, or you might require to change some architecture, and you also might require to integrate with other solutions. This is the only technology which can be adopted without making any change across the network or across the entire landscape. So that's the, again, biggest advantage in terms of the easy deploy as well as the low maintenance. And this is what we see, like when we talk to CISOs where we implement the deception strategies across the landscape, and when we have shown them how this decoy system is going to work for them, they're pretty much relaxed, because this technology can be deployed across the landscape, because normally people believe that this cannot be adopted in the entire landscape. But this, I'm definitely going to share examples of each of the area, but this can be implemented all across the landscape, and which allows you to have the right detection of all the advanced attacks that the adversaries are trying to do. So this is where once the decoy systems is deployed across, the CISOs get the required confidence. And then probably now what I'm going to do is I'll have few examples of deception in action in different areas to start with on an on-premises. Like where we are all across the world, people talking about ransomware attack, and probably this is the attack where the entire organization is getting impacted, and everybody gets the complete worry, because these are the kind of attacks which have been very successful in all kinds of industry, different levels of environment. And the major way in which these attacks have been successful is the ransomware attack starts with where the adversaries are able to send some phishing email where they are able to bypass the email security. And once they are able to bypass, and if they are able to play with the human minds in terms of like they are giving something to lure the humans, and the human are making mistake of clicking some links, or they are downloading some document or opening a document, then probably they are able to install some payload inside the environment. And once they are able to install a payload on any of the endpoint, as a next step, what they do is they start looking at all the data that is there, and then the next level is where they want to encrypt the data in that particular endpoint. And they will also try to move laterally by looking at the other file servers in the environment, and they'll start encrypting it. So that's how the ransomware attacks are being executed. And where the deception can play a role is you can spread certain fake files in each of the different drives of your particular endpoints. You can also spread certain fake file server. And what we normally do for all our customers is as soon as the attacker is touching these files, trying to encrypt or whatever happens to these files, immediately there is an action in terms of we isolating those systems. As soon as they are trying to exploit the file servers in the network and trying to encrypt any files there, immediately we are able to block those particular IP addresses from where they are trying to do. So that's how the deception techniques, the deception strategy helps in preventing against the ransomware attack. Moving next is like normally when the attacker is successful and is able to gain access to any of the user systems, his next step is to look for more users. And normally most of the organizations across the globe would be using Active Directory for their user management. And by design, the Active Directory allows to retrieve the list of the Active Directory. So the attacker who has been successful in gaining access to any of the user, the next step for him is to retrieve the user list from the Active Directory. And then probably there are ways by which they can get the passwords, the hashes, and they start trying to get inside the different users also. And the way deception can be spreaded in this scenario also is because this is a very critical area where the attacker is trying to enter one user, and from user is trying to move to other users, which is a lateral movement. So these lateral movements are very critical for all organizations. And what we normally do is we spread certain fake username passwords. And once this fake username passwords, the breadcrumbs are being touched, what we do is we immediately take actions there. So as soon as we are able to see a particular IP address trying to use this username and password, we are again blocking that, we are isolating the system. So those kind of actions can be taken. So even the most critical part before the attackers are reaching those crown jewels, which is the lateral movement, we have the right way to detect by luring them, and we are able to prevent. Then probably the way Josh was explaining about the phishing attacks, where a lot of time where phishing is definitely successful. And what we have learned is there are so many ways by which the attackers do phishing. They also visit your social media, and if you put some actual email address, the official email address there, they will pick up the email address and try to do certain level of deception for you and try to make the phishing successful. And the way deception can be leveraged in such scenario is also like what we did it like there was a CISO where they had all the security controls in place in terms of email security. Still they were getting some phishing emails delivered, and they were definitely under attack, and it was a sophisticated attack that was happening. And that's where we again did a social media decoy strategy, which is a deception strategy that we adopted. What we did is we created a social media account, a decoy social media account, which looks like top management of an organization. And what we did is we kept one particular official email address for that decoy social media account. And the steps that we followed on this is whenever the adversary is trying to send any email to this particular top management social media account, we are tracking it because it's a fake email that we have created, which is a decoy email which is created. And as soon as he's sending some email, we are immediately monitoring it, all in terms of what kind of attachments are coming, what kind of URLs are coming, what IP address from where it is coming. And immediately the actions is like we are blocking the URLs, blocking the IP addresses. We are also blocking those email addresses in the email security gateway. So again, a personalized threat intelligence, and we are able to fight against the adversary's advanced attack of phishing as well using the social media decoy. Then a lot of time where the idea for an attacker is to get not only get access to the digital systems, but they also want access to the CCTVs and the physical devices in the environment also. And that's where also we can have the examples of deceptions where we can have the actions taken on that also, wherein like there is a network in which the attacker was successful, and he's trying to access the CCTV system of the environment. And what we do is we always do one deployment of a fake CCTV system in the LAN where we have the actual CCTV video management system being deployed. And once the adversary or the internal attacker or whosoever it is has been successful or is trying to access this particular system, or could be like he's not aware which is the actual video management system and which is the fake video management system. And as soon as he's trying to log into this fake system, again we are taking certain actions, all in terms of immediately notifying the SOC operations, immediately taking an action from a security orchestration and automation, where we are writing a rule to block particular IP address if it's external, isolating the system if it's internal. So we are doing a complete analysis of an attacker's behavior, even not only in the digital systems, but when they are trying to attack the physical video management systems also. So this is how the decoy systems can not only help in terms of the detection against the digital systems, but also when they are trying to attack your physical systems like your CCTVs, your access control. So many ways in which the different decoy strategies that can be spreaded. Most importantly, the way Ravindra sir explained about the cloud attacks, which is like security in the cloud is always a critical factor for all the customers who are trying to build their digital transformation on the clouds. And the way different kinds of cloud attacks are happening, the deception is becoming very critical and important for all kinds of advanced cloud attacks, because it allows you to early detect and also allows you to detect the most advanced attacks as well. So normally in a cloud environment, how we leverage by way of the different decoy systems that can be spreaded is normally when an attacker is trying to attack the cloud environment, there are two things which he is definitely trying. One is he definitely wants an access to the IAM logins by way of getting the key, and once they have the key, they are trying to get the access of the entire AWS account. So that's one way. And second is they exploit any of the application weaknesses and are able to land inside the cloud, and from where they move laterally. So what we do is at both these strategies, we can have the fake IAM login accounts created. And as soon as anybody is trying to access those keys and is trying to log in, immediately we can have the actions. And also within the entire cloud VPC and the cloud landscape, when we have the attacker successful to penetrate the applications, we have the various strategy to spread various cloud components, which are the fake services in itself. And immediately the attacker is trying to move laterally, and we are able to detect and write the response to it. So again, the most of the advanced attacks, we have various use cases where we can do the detection and the prevention by way of spreading the decoys across the cloud landscape as well. And probably deception, now a lot of mobile attacks are also happening. You have a lot of mobile security controls happening, a lot of different security solutions talking about it. But when people are making mistakes, definitely attackers are getting successful. And that's where again the decoy system in case of mobile also really helps. Like in terms of what we can do is there could be some folders which looks like very, very confidential and very important for the user, or when the adversary is successful to get inside those mobile and is trying to access certain documents, because he was always look for certain emails, certain documents, and certain messages, which is where he sees that, yeah, the actual data of this mobile is in this particular document or this message or email. So what we can also do is we can again do a decoy system there, where we can have the fake documents being spreaded, certain fake communication where there are links, certain fake emails also can be put in. So it looks like when they're looking for such information and trying to touch this, it's the same thing which what they do. We are able to lure them, and again, when we are getting an alert that, yeah, somebody is trying to touch this decoy systems which were spreaded in the mobile, immediately we can wipe off, we can break the controls, so we can take the access. So a lot of things can be done on the action part of it. So these are the advanced ways in which the decoys are also being used in the mobile attack scenarios. And probably what we believe, where I'm sure Josh is the one who has been giving us the required services for detecting the early detecting the compromised username and passwords for the customers. We use the API of Breachsense, and what we also do is we understand that deception we just need not to spread in the actual digital landscape, but what we actually need to do is we also need to have certain ways by which we can have the deception spreaded on the environment where they start and end the attack, which is the dark web. So what we can do is, like a normal scenario, the adversaries would go on the dark web, or sometimes deep web also, and they would look for certain data, certain credentials, and they would try to attack the organization by those leaked username passwords. They would also try to grab those confidential documents which are lying on the dark web. And the way deception again can be leveraged in such scenario, which is a very advanced way of deploying deception. But what you can do is you can also have certain fake files being spreaded on the dark web. You can also proactively have certain compromised username password being spreaded in the dark and the deep web. So as soon as the attacker is trying to use this particular fake systems which were spreaded by us, immediately we can get the high alert. We need to be working on the actions that are required. So this actually helps you to detect the attacks which are going to come to you from the dark world also. So that's the very advanced scenario which can be adopted. And most importantly, we all have to agree is adversaries have always been smarter than the security, because they also know that, yeah, there is a system like decoy, the honeypots, and then probably what they have been doing is they also have learned how to detect those decoy systems also. So that's something which has been happening, and that's always become a race between an adversary and a security team. But most importantly, the way we spread the decoy system is we always leverage by making it more and more dynamic, which will definitely confuse them. So it's like making a dynamic system which is known as moving target defense, so that we are making the systems dynamic, and it's not very easy to detect the system against the actual and the decoy system. So this is how it happens. Like there is a crown jewel for an organization where when you have one decoy system or few decoy system and few security system and other systems, and which are all static in nature, then probably attackers might gain a knowledge about the environment and they might reach a crown jewel. And in a scenario where there are multiple systems, multiple security systems, and also the decoy system, but all of them are kind of static, then still there are a chance where they are able to reach those crown jewels. So that's still a possibility. But when we make a scenario for an attacker where our decoy systems are very dynamic, we keep rotating it, we keep changing it, it becomes very, very difficult for an adversaries to understand the difference between the actual and the decoy system. So it's like kind of very dynamic environment, and they would definitely make a mistake of touching those dynamic systems. So what we do is we make dynamic decoys also in terms of the rotating the different services like the FTP, HTTP, SMTP, and it keeps rotating. So it's very difficult for an attacker to understand which is the actual system and the decoy system, and they definitely are lured to this dynamic systems as well. And most importantly, post detecting the different deception based scenarios across the digital landscape, what we do is we write responses. So it's the responses are very much like the attacker, because normally an attacker, what they do is once they have the access, they would play their next step in terms of having access one, which is the initial access within the environment. They want to be there, be persistent. Then once they have the persistence there, they want to escalate the privileges. Once they are successfully able to escalate the privileges, they want to move to other systems also, start moving laterally. So they have their own ways of having the response once they have their first success. So what we do is we also have our own strategy to write responses to all these different scenarios of decoys, where we have all kinds of fake services spread across the digital landscape. And what we first do is we observe all kinds of attacks that are coming in on any kind of access that happens to any of this decoy system that is spreaded. Immediately we have an alert in our SIEM solution. From the SIEM, it goes to our security orchestration and automation through a webhook. And then probably there are a lot of APIs where we do a further enrichment by doing threat intel, checking our own databases, and notifying the SOC team, sending an SMS, email, opening a ticket. And most importantly, the playbook is always where we have certain rules, like writing a rule in blocking an IP address in a firewall, or a particular block in an email security, web security. So a lot of ways where we write responses. So that's how the overall strategy is. It's not just the deception and the detection, but it's always a response which we work on when we have the deceptions being triggering the alerts. And again, a scenario which I talked about when I was talking about the cloud attacks, where there is a developer who is using AWS, and probably he has certain keys in his endpoint where he is having the access to the cloud environment. And once the attacker is successful to this endpoint, he would definitely look for this AWS key and try to log into their cloud environment. And the way decoys can be spreaded is we can have certain fake AWS keys spreaded in this endpoint. And as soon as the attacker who has been successful on that particular endpoint, and he is trying to use this key to further log in to the actual cloud system, what we are doing is we are constantly monitoring. As soon as that key, the fake key which is being used, we have an immediate alert, and post that we take that particular IOC and block it in the VPN, the firewall, the VPC flow logs, VPC policies, and the other policies where we should be blocking it, so that we are able to proactively prevent the lateral movement of those attacks also. So that's how, again, in the cloud scenarios also, we can have the proper response written by spreading the decoy and then writing the responses. And what we all believe is deception has definitely worked when other technologies fails, because deception works because it traps the attackers in their own game. So that's the major takeaway of leveraging deception all across the digital landscape.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jaydeep, for taking us through that presentation. And I think it's time up for us to ask a few queries from our audience who has been tuning with us behind us online. Truly honored to have you all with us this evening. Evening for me here from Sri Lanka, and to our guests who are joining us from all over Europe and India as well. We thought we'll do a quick survey just to get your input and get some ideas out there to see whether you agree or disagree to certain questions that we're asking. And the question one will come up on screen now. There you go. Do you agree that adversaries will enter your organization today or tomorrow? All you have to do is just click agree or disagree. Well, we're not allowed to vote. However, the team, you can take a minute to click on that. A quick poll will be shown on your screen in a few more minutes. So the question is, do you agree that the adversaries will enter your organization today or tomorrow? I believe most of the organizations may come across in the future, but we're yet to find out how that is. And we also want to take another, okay, agree. Brilliant. That's what a lot of them say, but 7% disagrees with that. We're moving on to another question. And the next question is, have you considered deception as a necessary element into your security? Have you considered deception as a necessary element into your security? Now, this is an eye-opener to a lot of you, and we'll find out and see what your answer for this is. Giving a minute or two for you to drop in your answer. And following this, we'll have a panel discussion with, okay, brilliant, 86% saying yes, and 14% dropping in with a no. Thank you. Would love to hear your feedback, and that's why we sent in the survey question. We're going to start the panel discussion now, just to throw in a few questions to our panelists who have joined us for today's webinar. The question that has come through is that this question will be to Mr. Sagi, the co-founder and CEO of Deceptive Bytes. How can deception technology change the way security teams operate? Change is hard, and how do you see this, Mr. Sagi?
That's a great question. So security teams today are overwhelmed by complex management of endpoint solutions, alert and information about attacks, and I think by too many false positives. Understaffed, they are unable to handle every alert given, and they are under heavy burden of operating such solutions, delaying given proper response time and fixed issue raised by various attacks. Using, for example, active endpoint deception solution, security teams can receive highly fidelity alerts, which changes their tactics from chasing detections to preventing attacks, and eventually to reduce the overall operational burden.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sagi, for bringing us that answer. More promising, I suppose. Our next question is to Mr. Josh, the technical director and founder for Breachsense. Where do you see deception technology in 3 to 5 years, sir?
25 years, that's a great question. I think deception technology will obviously has its place, and I imagine it's going to become significantly more commonplace than it is now. And I imagine we will have many new interesting takes on how deception technology works, not only in terms of machines and in tokens, but everywhere else, because our data is no longer in our own networks, it's everywhere, and therefore we need deception everywhere as well.
All right, thank you very much. And my next question is to Mr. Ravindra, the security solution architect for AWS. So do you think current security tools are sufficient to combat current threat landscape?
Right, yeah, that's a tricky one. The thing is, there is always a evolving threat landscape, right? And you need to have right tools in place. You need to have right strategy in place. That's what we discuss about to address this, because it's not a static environment. Had this been a static environment, the world would have been different. It's quite dynamic environments. The landscapes are changing. The attack techniques are changing. And yes, so definitely, this is something that needs to be considered as a part of the security posture and be more proactive.
Okay. And Mr. Jaydeep, is there anything that you want to add, hearing the views and the positives that's been shared by the audience?
I completely agree that deception definitely has been playing a major role, and the way the threat landscape is changing, and the companies, every company across the globe is talking about how do they make their business digital. And when they talk about making it digital, they're definitely considering the entire landscape. And probably for any company to have all the security best practices and security controls and security technologies across the landscape is definitely going to be a journey, and it's definitely not going to be an easy journey also. And what needs to be considered is what can be done in this growing digital landscape, so that you can early detect the different kinds of advanced attacks. You can also work on the tactics of the attacker and just not rely on the techniques of the attacker. And that's where what we firmly like as Infopercept, we are all a great fan of the deception technology. And the way we have been leveraging is a lot of clients where we are supposed to build the MDR for them, which is the manage, detect, and response. The next generation SOC the world is talking about. People talk about the SIEM as the first technology to be implemented to start monitoring the entire landscape. But the way the approach, like we are not just waiting for this 3 to 5 years, but we have currently adopted also is we start the first line of defense or first line of solution that we always suggest is even before the major other managed detect solution is the deception, because deception gives you all the early detect. It gives you an capability. If the strategy is played well, then you are able to have the right personalized threat intelligence built for your organization, and you are able to understand the adversary's behavior. So it's more to do with the behavior and where he's trying to target. So the way we looked at the entire landscape, whether he's targeting your social media, your partners, your on-premises, cloud, mobile. So the way decoy systems will allow you is you can spread across the landscape, and probably you can have the right way of responding to it also. So deception definitely plays an important role in the past also, currently as well, and in future also it's going to play a very, very important role.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Jaydeep, for giving us that answer and very promising future aspects as well. We're going to take questions from the audience now for this session, and I believe we have our first question that has sent in. So you can send in your questions. That's how simple it is, so that we can pull it up and throw it up to one of our panelists who are present here with us online to discuss on these areas. The first question is probably to Mr. Sagi. Can endpoint deception potentially replace antivirus software?
So that's a great question. So I believe in a multi-layer approach on the endpoint, and although endpoint deception can replace AV, as it's far more efficient against unknown and sophisticated threats, I still suggest organizations to keep an AV to increase their security against known threats. For organizations that want to save some money, we, for example, can offer them to use our integration to Windows Defender that is built in the operating system and comes for free. Of course, they can manage everything from a single dashboard.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sagi, for giving us that answer. Connecting to that, this question is to Mr. Jaydeep. What is the success rate of deception against ransomware?
So probably this is a very critical question to be answered. Like it's you definitely, as a company, we will not say that deception is 100% successful. We would be very transparent there. But then probably it definitely increases the chances of detecting the advanced attacks that are happening. The way it happens is whether it is the success that the adversaries are getting on your endpoints, on your cloud workloads, or your servers. What happens is the adversaries definitely are going to break certain systems, are definitely going to enter the systems. Once they have their entry, for executing and being that ransomware success, definitely they need to have certain actions being done in terms of escalating the privileges, trying to encrypt the files, trying to encrypt the crown jewels. They would look for the files which are very critical. And the way this can be successful is you can definitely spread certain fake identities. You can definitely spread certain fake files. You can make these files look exactly the business critical files. You can put the fake identities also, in the sense like which looks like an real identity of an the management or an actual user. And the way we can always trigger the responses is in terms of when the adversaries are trying to escalate the privileges or trying to encrypt those files, where we were able to successfully lure. Definitely we are able to detect and then probably have the right prevention to it. The success rate may not be 100% guaranteed, but the way we have experienced with a lot of our customers across, when there is an advanced attack, there is a success of the access to the system for an adversary, and most of the time, we would agree that most of the time we were able to detect those lateral movement and the escalations the adversaries are able to do. And once we are able to detect, we are able to write those responses. So it's more of the experience that we have, that the deception has always helped us to detect those advanced attacks and write those preventions to it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Some very valuable information shared there on the success rate of deception, and also looking at it in a different viewpoint as well. The last question probably we'll take from the audience. Can advanced cloud attacks be protected using deception? This question is probably to Mr. Ravindra.
Yeah, that's an important question. So you see, essentially this boils down to working in a dynamic environment, right? And you always want to be step ahead in terms of the tactics that adversaries are using, and to be more proactive in knowing what those tactics are being used, what are the weakest links that are being targeted. And that's exactly where deception technology as a mechanism does help you add additional layer of security on top of what you have built.
Thank you very much, sir. And thank you for those brilliant answers being shared. Thank you for those valuable questions being shared by the audience who have joined us here today for this webinar. And we value your time with us and for being a part of today's webinar as well. Now, a big thank you to our panelists as we come to the conclusion of today's webinar. We've had some very interesting insights. A lot of you have worked on these areas to present to our invitees who have joined us for this session on cybersecurity webinar on deception, the proactive layer of defense depth. We'd like to say a very big thank you to our speakers, Mr. Sagi Lamay, Mr. Josh Amishav, Mr. Ravindra Ved, and Mr. Jaydeep Ruparelia. If you want to get in touch with them, they're very much on LinkedIn, or you can drop them an email or through the Infopercept website. That is, you got to contact them on the website, which is appearing on the screen in a short moment, www.infopercept.com. that's the website that you can get in touch and drop them an email for further information. This is our way of saying thank you to our panelists for being with us today. It's truly been an honor and a pleasure, and great insights being shared, even despite the pandemic, that we can reach out to so much people virtually is one of the blessings that we have received. And therefore, it's truly amazing to be a part of a fantastic panel as well. While we say a very big thank you to all of you, the digital landscape is big, it's huge. We got to find ourselves to protect it from whatever the circumstances that we face. And we've got the experts to it. All you got to do is just contact them or get into a solution that you can provide to help save the world. Thank you very much for joining us. I truly hope you have a pleasant evening. I'm Sharon Mascarenhas from Sri Lanka.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.